Hello and welcome to the session Importance of Higher Education. Overview. Education not only plays an important role in our lives, it also has a role in the progress of an individual's mind and progress of country too. Education, though not basic requirement, is an essential requirement to live life comfortably. Education is very important for an individual's success in life. Education provides pupils teaching skills that prepare them physically, mentally and socially for the world of work in later life. It is generally seen as the foundation of society which brings economic wealth, social prosperity and political stability. Education is the best investment for the people because well-educated people have more opportunities to get a job which gives them satisfaction. Educated individuals enjoy respect among their colleagues and they can effectively contribute to the development of their country and society by inventing new devices and making new discoveries. Today's ever-growing numbers of people mostly are not satisfied with their basic education and try to get secondary or tertiary education in order to meet the demands of contemporary society. Some of them enter higher educational institutions and some search additional information on the internet. Good people sacrifice their time and money and sometimes even their health to raise educational level because they realize that education is their passport tomorrow and for the future. Higher education helps in maintaining a healthy society which prepares healthcare professionals, educated healthcare consumers and maintaining healthy population. In fact, basic education starts right from the birth of the child at home itself. However, for obtaining formal education, a child should go to some kind of educational institution. Apart from basic formal education that a person obtains at school or college, higher education is in great demand. Higher education refers to college degrees and university degrees. The main purpose of education is to educate individuals within society, to prepare and qualify them for work in economy as well as to integrate people into society and teach them the values and morals of society. Role of education is means of socializing individuals and to keep society smoothing and remain stable. Education in society prepares youngsters for adulthood so that they may form the next generation of leaders. It will yield strong families and strong communities. There is a rapidly growing demand for a higher education in the world today. Although a higher education is difficult to receive, the rewards of self-improvement, job insurance, a development of character and social improvements are what are going to satisfy a person. In school, students very rarely get to experience life. When the students get enrolled in college, they are first of all away from their families, so this makes them independent and thus they learn how to be on their own. Education is major aspect of development of any modern society, since if there is a deficit of educated people, then society will stop its further progress. The major speed breakers in the developing countries are ignorance and poverty. These can be overcome easily through education. No country will ever look back if the people are fully educated, have some income to support their family, are aware of what is happening in the world and contribute to the country's development. Module 2. Importance of higher education. Students must be equipped with knowledge and skills which are needed to participate effectively as members of society and contribute towards the development of shared values and common identity. Education has a vital role to play in assisting students to understand their cultural identity. Education acts as the distribution mechanism of the cultural values, such as it more layered the society and participate in society that carries the culture. In our culture today, there is a great emphasis on higher education. There are several reasons why people go for higher education. Most people seek higher education to improve their job prospects and social status. Some other go for it for self-improvement, development of character, and for the sake of knowledge. Higher education imparts education and knowledge in one specific field, such as sciences, social science, medicine, history, and others. Still, others like to pursue higher education to gain knowledge to serve humankind. Higher education helps people to see the world in a rational way for the benefit of all. It helps eliminating ignorance and several myths plaguing the world. Educated people get wider vision to perceive the facts of life. With globalization taking place, the job market has become even more competitive. Now, a person not only has to compete for a job with the people from his own community or country, but also with the people who emigrate from other countries. According to a research done by Bureau of Labor Statistics (BLS), the average earnings become high and the level of unemployment falls with each education level acquired. Also, people with higher education are more likely to get jobs which give lots of health benefits as well as pension benefits to the individual in his or her old age. With a higher education, you are ensured that you will have a better paying job. Studies have shown that people who have a higher degree, which translates into a good, satisfied life, are more likely to do social work and volunteering. Such behaviors do benefit the society as a whole, as the underprivileged get taken care of. While primary and secondary education gives the student a solid foundation in terms of basic knowledge and builds character and morality, higher education is very important as far as building one's career is concerned. Higher education is more about specialization in a particular field or different fields. Hence, choosing the right area of specialization is very important for a student if he is ambitious and desirous of making it big in life. Module 3. Development of System of Higher Education. The principles of higher education come from ancient Athens. From Athens, the desire for knowledge, the scientific quest, the pursuit of art and canons of criticism was adopted by other countries, especially the Western countries. Their legacies in Britain were represented by church, the state, and the universities. In Middle Ages, church had more temporal and educational power than today. Later, the universities dominated the church and the state. Their influence was enormous. If looking at the British universities, they have been remarkably successful institutions. Some have lasted over 700 years. All have expanded. The most important legacy from Athens is the method of advancing knowledge. The method is still central to the university teachings and research today. Athens produced Aristotle, the greatest writer and intellect of all times. The medieval universities that were successful were Plato's Academy and Aristotle's Lyceum. For a long time afterwards, ordinary mortals started thinking that there was no point in going on a journey of discovery themselves. The classical writers had become the authorities, viewed with the more authoritarian values of Galileo and Rome. The lecture system developed because not everyone could look up what the ancients said for themselves. There were too few manuscripts, and not everyone could read classical Greek and Latin. Discussions was the central process to resolve problems and disagreements. Before replying to opponents, they were asked to summarize their arguments. This encouraged accurate listening and understanding. In Britain, it was not until the Renaissance, the Reformation, and scientific revolution that followed the mold of medieval thought began to be broken. It was not the universities that broke it. Those changes were a part of heritage of higher education. In the 15th, 16th, and 17th century, there were new found freedom of expression in art, particularly in Italy, Italian Renaissance, and Elizabethan England. But the resistance of the church meant that studies of art stayed mostly outside the universities. Painting, music, sport, sculpture, dance, and ballet remained outside the higher education system. Then came the humanist movement. It was an intellectual movement that ridiculed the hypocrisy of the church. Its importance for higher education today lies in a new confidence in humanity, that people can by themselves study and exercise their own judgment. This confidence is what higher education constantly strives to give its students. The Renaissance humanism gave a new value to the individuals. Without this movement, the breaking of the Church of England would not have been possible. This break gave political freedom to both men and women, which in turn reinforced the greater value for the individuals. Individualism permitted original thinking. Universities were for people who aspired in higher education. Technical schools were for those with practical skills, and senior skills were for unskilled workers. This persisted until the 1944 Education Act, and arguably for another 20 years after that. As late as 1960s, advanced level Latin and Greek was a necessary entry-level qualification for undergraduates who seek arts degree at London University. Only recently have employment-based skills begun to find place in education curriculum. Slowly, science was given more importance. It was considered as a process of discovery. The linkage of science and research came from Germany, which was the then growing scientific and military power in the late 19th century and early 20th century. There had been growing demand for student places throughout the 19th and the 20th century. Higher education was seen as a path to success. From 1889 onwards, the government started helping the universities financially. After the First World War, many heroes went to the universities to pursue their higher studies. Accordingly, in 1919, the Treasury authorized a University Grants Commission, UGC. This was done to inquire into the financial needs of the universities and to advise the government as to the application of any grants that may be made by Parliament towards meeting them. After the formation of UGC, the government recognized the fact that provision of higher education is a matter of national concern, and it recognized its importance to maintain it. Another important principle was introduced called the buffer principle. The government recognized the freedom of the universities to manage their own affairs without interference, even though they were partly funded by the government. This gave a managerial freedom for the institutions. The assumption that higher education exists purely for the sake of those engaged in it is wholly misleading. It has an important role in preservation of democracy and good government that's worth paying for it. That's why the government has the responsibility to pay for it. At first, the proportion of university income from government grants was very small. Over the years, the amount has increased not only because students have increased, but also that new buildings have been required and new universities have been established. Government funding of both teaching and research is known as the dual support system or dual funding. During the years immediately after the Second World War, government had two priorities for higher education: to double the number of science students within 5 years and to provide emergency training for teachers. The first one achieved early because importance of science and technology in winning the war. After this, the number of students fell slightly during the 50s. The emphasis on science and technology continued with the development of regional technical colleges, later called the Colleges of Advanced Technology, under the control of local education authorities. There was steady growth in number of students later in the decade. 1963 was a crucial period in the development of higher education. In 1968, there was a worldwide protest against seeking more representatives in universities and colleges. One of the legacies of the period was increased student representation on decision-making bodies within institutions. In the same year, a new form of university was established to meet the needs of part-time home-based students. This was the Open University. It was in 1970s and early 1980s, efficiency had seemed to dominate the government's thinking on higher education. So, the government placed its emphasis on concept of quality and excellence. The Education Reform Act of 1988 marked the end of transformation of higher education. 4 years later, the Further and Higher Education Act of 1992 granted polytechnics the university status. The institutions themselves established Higher Education Quality Council (HEQC). This was done to conduct audits to ensure quality of education. Module 4 Trends in Financing of Higher Education. It has long been recognized that higher education institutions, particularly universities, are among the most stable and change-resistant social institutions to have existed during the past 500 years. The financing of higher education throughout the world has seen dramatic changes in the last decades of the 20th and the first decade of the 21st centuries. These trends, each with economic, political, and social roots and consequences, are noteworthy for their impacts on the financing of higher education. Increasing unit or per student course of instruction. The fundamental financial problem of higher education all over the world begins with the fact that universities face a trajectory of annual cost increases. Increasing enrollments is another factor. Increasing enrollments, which accelerate the financial impact of the naturally increasing per student cost, are a function of certain forces that vary greatly among countries like demographics, the increasing amount or final level of education per entering student, etc. Increasing enrollments accelerate the financial impact of the naturally increasing per student cost. Another factor affecting the financing of higher education in virtually all countries is the increasing share of world production, especially in the already industrialized countries, that is, moving either into services or into the so-called knowledge-based economy of high-tech design, finance management, and the like. The impact of globalization on higher education finance is to further raise the stakes to both nations and individuals of having or obtaining high levels of knowledge and skills, and thus to the sufficiency and quality of higher education. Globalization also applies directly to higher education in its ability to transmit the knowledge as well as the teaching learning process itself across borders electronically and without much, if any, control or even regulation by local or nation-state governments. Finally, globalization has a profound impact on the financing of all publicly financed agencies, including universities, both public and private, in its limiting effect on the ability of governments to tax and thus to keep up with higher education's continuous revenue needs. The impact of decentralization, devolution, and deregulation on higher education finance is to encourage the development of private higher education and, equally important, the privatization of public higher education. Let us summarize the main ideas discussed in this session. The unit talks about higher education and its importance in the modern world. Education, though not basic requirement, is an essential requirement to live life comfortably. It is generally seen as the foundation of society which brings economic wealth, social prosperity and political stability. Education is the best investment for the people because well-educated people have more opportunities to get a job which gives them satisfaction. Today's ever-growing numbers of people mostly are not satisfied with their basic education and try to get secondary or tertiary education in order to meet the demands of contemporary society. Some of them enter higher educational institutions and some search additional information on the internet. Higher education helps in maintaining a healthy society which prepares healthcare professionals, educated healthcare consumers and maintaining healthy population. Apart from basic formal education that a person obtains at school or college, higher education is in great demand. Higher education refers to college degrees and university degrees. The main purpose of education is to educate individuals within society, to prepare and qualify them for work in economy, as well as to integrate people into society and teach them the values and morals of society. There is a rapidly growing demand for a higher education in the world today. There are several reasons why people go for higher education. Most people seek higher education to improve their job prospects and social status. Some other goes for it for self-improvement, development of character and for the sake of knowledge. Higher education imparts education and knowledge in one specific field such as sciences, social science, medicine, history and others. Still, others like to pursue higher education to gain knowledge to serve humankind. Higher education helps people to see world in a rational ways for the benefit of all. According to a research done by the Bureau of Labor Statistics (BLS), the average earnings become high and the level of unemployment falls with each educational level acquired. While primary and secondary education gives the student a solid foundation in terms of basic knowledge and builds character and morality, higher education is very important as far as building one's career is concerned. Higher education is more about specialization in a particular field or different fields. The chapter then focuses on the history of development of higher education in detail. The problems with higher education are also talked about in the chapter. Now, you can try to answer the questions given here. 1. What's the role of education in shaping up an individual? 2. Give some of the reasons why people go for higher education. 3. Why was UGC formed? 4. What was the change brought by buffer principle? 5. What are the different trends in financing of higher education? 6. What's the relevance of higher education in the modern world? Now, you can go through the books for reference. Understanding Higher Education, an Introduction for Parents, Staff, Donald A. Bly, Ian McNay, Harold Thomas, Intellect Books, 1999. Hope that you have enjoyed the session. We will meet again with another topic. Thank you.